man on the street. Hopefully, I don't get hit by a car. I can see everything behind me at this point. I hope you guys are doing all right. Um, and let me make sure my audio and everything else is good. All right. Yeah. So I want to do a quick pop in. You know, when I was in the UK, I remembered having a conversation with someone, and I asked them a very basic question about the monarch and this notion of parliament and the monarch. This thing of, is the queen really in charge? And they said, look, if the queen really tried to assert her authority, they would strip her power away immediately. She is a figurehead. Now, some of this stuff is coming to question over issues of things that have taken place in the war, but for the most part, the queen has stayed a figurehead. There, but not. The specter of British past, at a point where, there used to be a war between Parliament and the thing. Boris Johnson is in power now. Boris Johnson, issue of getting through Brexit. He is unelected. You have a situation where a guy who got in using Tories. I mean, essentially, the only people who elected Boris Johnson were Tories. And this guy who was only elected by Tories, a very tiny percentage of a country with, I forget how many millions of people, is now with that like point something percent powering him and legitimacy given to him by point something percent, meaning only Tories. He is now going through with getting the Queen's permission to suspend Parliament. Now understand why he's doing this. The whole point of suspending Parliament is to get to the thing of saying, look, I don't want Parliament to be able to take any actions that could stop Brexit. And Parliament has no appetite at all for Brexit, meaning there is no appetite for no deal Brexit. By the same token, the European Union is not trying to deal with them. And he took that to the public. The public will probably also tell him no. Even though they may want to leave, they don't necessarily want to leave. I hope you understand my point. What Boris Johnson is doing is trying to suspend Parliament by giving and cutting down on the amount of time Parliament can do anything about preventing a no-deal Brexit. He goes to the Queen, the 14th, meaning they leave on the 31st, meaning Parliament would only have 2 weeks to do anything, including, which would immediately trigger an election. I hope you understand what I'm saying. He is literally trying to undermine Parliament itself in order to force through a no-deal Brexit that he knows there is no appetite for. That's extraordinary. People are calling it a coup. People are saying the monarch is given permission. But understand the situation that the monarch is in. The monarch is neutral. The monarch, giving Boris Johnson the go-ahead to suspend Parliament, is a fig leaf. If the monarch didn't do it, what would have happened? If the monarch told Parliament no, the Parliament being represented by, in this case, or the government by Boris Johnson, what happened is this: the monarch said, no, I'm not giving you permission to suspend Parliament at all. In which case you have Parliament that has a different perspective than monarch itself, meaning the monarch is given a perspective in governmental affairs. Oh, this is awesome politics. There's nothing like this in the United States. I mean, you're literally talking about a monarch involving in the political process. Think about this. This person is supposed to be appointed by God. And that person that's appointed by God sits there, and Johnson, representative of the government, meaning the public will, goes to the monarch and beseeches this being that we're pretending is appointed by God. That's extraordinary. That's British politics. It's a beautiful thing, right? My point is this. The Queen had no choice, for the most part, but to stay neutral. And the neutral position is saying, yes, you want to suspend Parliament. I may not like it. I may think it's a horrible idea. I may think you're going to fuck the country. But it is neutral. I have to stay neutral. In which case, it doesn't even matter what the Queen thinks. Assert herself, they will strip away her power. That person is right. That person is right. Meaning, the only position, the only tenable position that the Queen can take in this is neutrality. If the public's will, or the government's will, as represented by Boris Johnson, is to suspend Parliament, then fair enough. But that's the rub, right? That's not the country's will. That's Boris Johnson's will. That's the will of a very tiny, tiny, tiny section of the population, in a sense, of Tories, Brexiteers. That's what you have. That's not the public's will at all. Small number of people, so I can't necessarily in good conscience say that you get that. I mean, the monarch could have made a particular argument about it, but fact of the matter is the monarch, I would imagine, doesn't want to get involved in this process. In which case, Boris asks, the monarch approves. Which means that Parliament, they're going to be in session for a few days, but ultimately they're going to be suspended until October 14th. They leave on the 31st. Boris Johnson is doing this to stop Parliament from having any power to stop him from taking the EU, from taking Britain out of the European Union without the public, with the public politics. I mean, we have nothing in America like this. Can you imagine if something is taking place in our political discourse and we fight about it, we complain about it, and then Trump has the queen or king or some royalty that was appointed by God that we have to pretend that is appointed by God? Are you serious? A prince? You know, apparently we have a foul prince that's in the UK. Let's talk about that. How about that? I guess my point is, you know, the queen is in somewhat of an odd, difficult position. Nobody, you know, she was born into this particular position, and yes, she pretends that she's somehow, you know, endowed with something. But at the very least, the reality of it is her powers are entirely tethered to whether it's at Parliament's leisure, if that makes sense. It's optics, the fact they have a queen. The reality, the underlying reality is all of this is at Parliament's discretion. If the Queen told Boris Johnson no, it would have triggered a constitutional crisis. A constitutional crisis because technically they're somewhat of a monarch. It's a weird duck. There's all sorts of fudges in British politics. It's not necessarily like American politics where that stuff gets ironed out. It's a fudge. The Queen might have had a choice, but like I said, in most situations, whether the person has a choice or not almost doesn't really matter. The events themselves compel the behavior of the situation. In this case, Boris Johnson, unelected, no mandate at all, no majority, not even tested from the standpoint of the public getting its sense of something that is going to radically transform what the UK looks like. For years, decades, and wasn't elected, is now trying to find ways to undermine Parliament itself to prevent Parliament from getting its say. That is extraordinary. This is amazing politics. So the question becomes, what does Parliament do? You get 2 weeks. You get 2 weeks. Do you recall Johnson? Do you recall Johnson? I'll leave it here. Some people say it's buffering and my signal might not be good. Like, share, subscribe. And if this video didn't go well, I'll upload another copy of it when I get home. This is amazing politics. Like, profound, amazing politics. And there is nothing like it in the United States at all. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.